I'm waiting for it to. It hasn't turned red yet. It's still making noise, so I'm not sure if it picks it up or not. So, all right, we are doing God Cares, Part 10, and we're going to be looking at Jacob. And after Rebecca's solution, so God Cares, Part 10, Jacob. And after Rebecca's solution to send Jacob away to avoid being murdered by his brother, it's usually a good reason to leave home. Your brother's going to murder you. And to preserve the Christ line, her husband Isaac agrees to the idea. So we pick this up in Genesis 28:1. And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Isaac is moving in a godly direction, but you can always see Rebecca's influence, which is a good thing. Jacob will be sent to Padam Aram, to the household of Bethuel, Rebecca's father. He's going there to find a wife from the daughters of his brother Laban, of her, his mother's brother Laban, and be in no hurry to return. And I don't tell at least his brother's furious past, since he's waiting for his dad to pass so he could take his brother out. So, verse 2, arise, go to Padam Aram. Now, Padam Aram is in the plain of Aram, or Syria, in upper Mesopotamia, where Urfa and Haran are. Aram was Shem's, Shem's son. That would make Noah his grandfather. Aram in the Arameans are usually called Syrians or from Syria. So when you read about Syrians, you're really reading about the descendants from Mr. Aram. So he needs to go. He needs to go to Padam Aram. Bob, why don't you read verses 2 to 4 for us?
Arise, go to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. And God Almighty, El Shaddai, bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of peoples, and give thee the blessing of Abraham to thee and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham.
Finally, Isaac shows some realization that Jacob was the Christ line, since he had received the blessing, and not Esau, his oldest son, who had already taken 2 Hittite wives.
And Isaac,
verse 5. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And Isaac sent away Jacob, and he went to Paddan Aram unto Laban, son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother.
Esau realizes that his choice of wives was not pleasing to his parents. And, who really knows if Jacob's coming back? So maybe there's time to find a wife that's closer to the right bloodline. So you'll see his thinking here in verses 6 through 9.
When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take him a wife from thence, and that he blessed him and gave him a charge, saying, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan, and that Jacob obeyed his father and his mother, and was gone to Paddan Aram. And Esau, seeing that the daughters of Canaan pleased not his father, then went Esau to Ishmael, and took unto the wives which he had Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nabahoth, to be his wife.
So, hey, that's at least getting closer, to the, Esau is going to, Ishmael's son. But it's still not the Christ line. Meanwhile, Jacob becomes the focal point of the biblical narrative, since he is one generation closer to the promised seed. We don't need to have all the extra details about Isaac. We move to the next one with his son Jacob, because he's functioning. And then once Jacob, once he gets back into the promised land, they'll jump to the children. So verses 10 to 12. And Jacob went out from Beersheba, and he went towards Haran. And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place, put them for his pillows. and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder, a stone ramp from the earth, stretching all the way up into the heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Now, Jesus had an intriguing statement about angels of God to Nathanael the first time they met, John 1.
Jesus answered and said unto him, Nathanael, because I said unto thee, I saw thee under the fig tree, believest thou? Thou shalt see greater things than these. And he saith unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man.
So angels receiving orders to serve, to help, to deliver messages, coming to earth to fulfill them, then returning for more instructions. Not sure how Nathanael saw all that. Jesus said, hey, you're going to see some of this, but he sure was a part of it. That's for sure. Saw the results of it. So that's what was happening here. God showed him this huge stone ramp going up. I mean, he didn't show him a metal aluminum ladder or something like that that folds all the way up. So Genesis 28:13, and behold, the Lord stood above it. Well, I mean, look, if it's stretching from the earth all the way into the heavens, how could he see God way up there? The Hebrew text reads, the Lord stood beside him. You know, there's like a little speck at the top up there. The Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. All of us are blessed because of this. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. For I will not leave thee until I have accomplished that which I have spoken to thee of. So I am with you wherever you go. I will protect you throughout your journey. I will bring you home to the land of your fathers. This had to be extremely comforting to Jacob at this time of uncertainty in his life. You know, the true God was not a regional God like many of the pagan gods. Those gods only worked in the local, the local area where they were at. And so this was one of the things that the true God said, hey, I'm with you every step of the way. His twin brother wanted to murder him. He is sent on a journey by himself to a foreign land with very little. He probably doesn't even have a horse or a camel or a mule, or an internal combustion engine vehicle. Not even an electric one. He's sent there to find one specific family in which to find a wife, and of course to hide from his brother. He doesn't even know if there are any daughters in this family. He doesn't have any sisters. God is very timely then with this comfort because God cares. He is the God of all comfort, the God of all encouragement. 2 Corinthians.
Blessed be God, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, compassion, and the God of all comfort, encouragement, who comforteth us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God.
In Genesis 28:16-18.
And Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful, how awesome is this place. This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put for his pillows and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it.
Man, he'd found the Stargate. There it was. This stone was set up as a monument of God's encouraging revelation and of his vow in response to all that God had promised. 30 years later, Jacob would repeat the solemn act in the same place after he leaves Padan Aram, and God appears to him and reiterates his promise to him. So that's 30 years later. So when we get into that segment of the word next week, we'll read all of that. Monumental stonework was not uncommon. Have you ever heard of Stonehenge?
Hmm.
Moses built 12 pillars at Mount Sinai as a sign of God's covenant, Exodus 24:4. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord and rose up early in the morning and builded an altar under the hill and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And God instructs Joshua to build a stone monument to commemorate how the waters of Jordan were cut off when they first entered into the promised land, as a memorial to the children of Israel. They're crossing over for the first time, and we're going across the Jordan River, and they're just going to walk across. So Joshua 4:1-9.
And it came to pass when all the people were clean passed over Jordan, that the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, Take you 12 men out of the people, out of every tribe a man, and command ye them, saying, Take you hence out of the midst of Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones, and ye shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where ye shall lodge this night. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had prepared of the children of Israel, out of every tribe a man. And Joshua said unto them, Pass over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take you up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according unto the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean ye by these stones? Then ye shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over Jordan, the waters of Jordan were cut off. And these stones shall be for a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. The children of Israel did so as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of Jordan, as the Lord spake unto Joshua, according to the number of the 12 of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them unto the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests which bear the ark of the covenant stood, and they are there unto this day.
This appears to be saying that a duplicate set of stones was put back in the river at the spot that the Ark of the Covenant stood. I never understood this. I kept reading it back and forth. Am I getting this right? All right, everybody pick up a stone, take it over, you 12, and then somebody else bring it back and put a different stone in that spot? Well, there's no explanation, though, given about this second duplicate set of stones. So as I was reading translations, looking at them, Dr. Lamb's translation implies, and I believe that this is the answer, that there's only one set of stones. Verse 9 from Lamb's says, And they set up 12 stones, which they had taken out of the midst of the Jordan, where stood the feet of the priests who were bearing the Ark of the Covenant, and they are there to this day. So basically, it's just a continuation. It wasn't, Joshua said, hey, bring some back. It's just the ones you got. It's just a continuation, an explanation of what they did. They set it up, and then, hey, we're going to have a family outing today. We're going to go to the Jordan River and look at a bunch of stones. Do we have to, Dad? Yes, I want to tell you a story about what God did to the Jordan River. It was a memorial. So that's how God did it. I think there's only one set. I think that's the real answer to it. But most of the translations stayed in line, but it made no sense. Lamb's, though, I think really nailed it. Later, at Shechem, Joshua sets up a stone of witness under an oak tree for memorial of the covenant between God and his people. Joshua 24, verses 26 and 27.
And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and took a great stone, and set it up there under an oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said unto all the people, Behold, this stone shall be a witness unto us, for it hath heard all the words of the Lord which he spake unto us. It shall be therefore a witness unto you, lest ye deny your God.
Jacob's pouring oil or anointing the pillar was designed as a solemn act of consecration of this stone to its monumental purposes. It is not to be confused with the pagan practices of pouring oil upon stones and worshiping them. It's similar in our culture to when we christen the maiden voyage of a ship. We cut a ribbon and smash a bottle of champagne across its bow. All right. All right. So back to Genesis 28. We continue with verse 19. And Jacob called the name of the place Beth-el. Beth is house. El is God. The house of El, the house of God. But the name of the city was called Luz. Let's be started at first time. Now, Jacob vowed a vow. It should be translated as since, because he's not saying, hey, God, if you really will take care of me, I'll do this. No, since you're going to take care of me. Jacob vowed a vow saying, since God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. And so he's going to have that, God is God through the whole thing. He wasn't going to wait and see if God could pull it off. That's the whole time. So since makes more sense. And this stone, which I set for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee. Now, one does not take lightly vowing a vow. This act is an extremely solemn and sacred and binding commitment between God and the person choosing to vow a vow. Marriage and ordination of the Christian faith are two vows that in our culture should never be taken lightly. Here, Numbers 30, verse 2. If a man vow a vow unto the Lord, or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. And in Deuteronomy 23, verses 21 to 23. When thou shalt vow a vow unto the Lord thy God, thou shalt not slack to pay it, for the Lord thy God will surely require it of thee, and it would be sin, in thee. But if thou shalt forbear to vow, it shall be no sin in thee. That which is gone out of thy lips, thou shalt keep and perform, even a free will offering, according as thou hast vowed unto the Lord thy God, which thou hast promised with thy mouth. I was at the advanced class in 1980, and it was horizontal hour, one of my favorite times of the class. And like a breeze came through the room, and my Bible went and stopped. And so I picked up the Bible and I looked at it, and it was Deuteronomy 23:21. You're gonna vow a vow, you better pay it. It's like, ooh, okay, because I vowed a vow about a year earlier in Indianapolis in a rainy mist on a street corner. But anyway, so here's a year later being reminded that I'd done that, and it was time to keep moving. Jacob wholeheartedly committed himself to God for God's protection and for a safe return to the land God had given to Abraham and his descendants. So, Genesis 29, where are we going now?
Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered. And they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place.
The culture was to wait until everyone showed up before taking away the stone. Sometimes there was even a key in which to open the well. Well, let's see what's going to continue to happen.
And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel, his daughter, cometh with the sheep. And he said, Lo, it is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And they said, We cannot until all the flocks be gathered together, until they roll the stone from the well's mouth. Then we watered the sheep. And while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept for joy.
The kiss was the traditional Eastern greeting. See, when it talked about, he entered into the land of the people of the East. He crossed the Euphrates. He's now in Mesopotamia. He's in that segment. And that was referred to as the East. And so he has a bunch of traditional things to do, being very polite. Is all well with them? How are they all doing? I'm glad to know that. And I bet he was real happy to see a daughter. Verse 12.
And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things.
Laban knew that Abraham's servant was sent by a wealthy individual when he got there. He must have been a little quizzical about Jacob showing up by himself without any wealth for a dowry, since he came searching for a wife. Verse 14. And Laban said to him, surely thou art bone in my flesh. We're family. And he abode with him the space of a month. He didn't just sit around and talk, watch TV, play video games. He worked with them. He was a shepherd, so he'd work with them. And Laban said unto Jacob, because thou art my brother, brother from nationality, not actual brothers. Shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? He's going, this guy's a pretty good worker. I want to hire this guy. What if he can do garage doors? And Laban had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, which meant weary, and the name of the younger was Rachel, which is Ewe. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. I don't know how many different translations and commentaries that I went through. Here's what people have said about being tender-eyed, because I never really understood it. Leah was tender-eyed. She had tender eyes. They were soft, delicate, lovely. Or some people are saying it's because they were weak, clouded, with no sparkle or dull. It did not mean poor vision, but they lacked the deep, lustrous color common among brown-eyed people. She had tender eyes. The word tender is spoken of to describe children and animals that are still young and weak. Now, one commentary describes her as having soft blue eyes, thought to be a blemish. See, on ancient monuments, the evil eye is always pictured as blue. Leah's eyes could have been blue, and though they were pretty, they drew away from all her other qualities because she had that evil eye look. She had that weary look. She had, she just didn't look like everybody else with blue eyes instead of having brown eyes. Now, I love Lamb's translation of verse 17. And Leah had attractive eyes, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. Other translations describe Rachel as elegant in form as well as lovely in countenance. She was lovely of form and face, shapely and in every way a beauty. The Septuagint reads, she was of a beautiful countenance and a very comely person. Verse 18, Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. He probably could have negotiated it down, but he was looking at, the quality of the individual and said, she's worth 7 years. I will serve you 7 years for your daughter. And Laban said, better I give her to you than give her to another man. Just hang in there, abide with me. And Jacob, this is one of the great verses in the word. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had to her. Isn't that sweet? Now, a proposal of marriage was made to the father without the daughter being consulted. The suitor would either bestow costly gifts on the family, like Abraham's servant had done in exchange for Rebekah, right? Showed up, here, just pass gold and gifts and everything around to everybody. That's one way that you have a dowry, right? That's what he did for Rebekah, Laban's sister. Or you could give cattle to the value the father sets upon his daughter, kind of like what Pete Martinez did. He demanded, a whole bunch of different goats from Brian to, marry his daughter Tiffany. And so Brian didn't get it to start with, but then he figured that. So he sent, 10, 12 little stuffed goats to Pete. over 6-month time frame. So that would be something else you could do. That's the old 8-cow woman or 10-cow woman, that story. So that's one of the things that you could do. And thirdly, uh, you can give personal services for a specified time. And here he asked for 7 years. Jacob submitted to the drudgery of a hired servant to obtain Rachel. The time went rapidly, though, for even severe and difficult duties became light when love is the source of one's actions. At this time, Laban had no sons, so Jacob could then be the heir and carry on the family line. That was all part of the equation, too. So, Bob, what's verse 21 and 22?
And Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast.
So this is one of the things, little thing down at the bottom. 7 years later, this is what's happening. So the usual duration of a marriage feast was a week. Hey, Mazel Tov. All right, verse 23. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah. He gave Leah Zilpah, his maid, for a handmaid. Right? She was given to his daughter, right? Not to the man. It was somebody that would work with her directly. And then it came to pass in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this that thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? Well, Jacob got a taste of his own medicine, didn't he? Laban supplanted him. Leah was probably about the same size as Rachel, and she wore the wedding veil that would entirely conceal her whole body. Thus, in the darkness of his tent, Jacob did not realize he had been tricked. Laban also gave Zilpah. Now, Zilpah, this is the servant. Her name means dignity, nearness, or intimacy. Sounds like a woman of quality that was given to Leah to help her, to be her own personal servant. Well, let's keep reading with verse 26.
And Laban said, It must not be so done in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years. And Jacob did so, and fulfilled her, Leah's week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah, simple, stupid, or terror, his handmaid.
Which maid would you like to have? The different names. I mean, this guy Laban is something. All right, go ahead.
His handmaid to be her maid. And he went in unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, slighted, or less loved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, Surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me.
Right. When you name your first child after a sandwich, man, everybody's going to love you. No, Reuben means see or behold a son. This was a joyful acknowledgement of this evidence of God's goodness. She recognized the grace of God. Her becoming a mother ensured her rising in estimation, both of her husband and of society. And now she's going to have Simeon, Levi, and Judah. But let's keep reading.
And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Behold, the Lord hath heard that I was hated, and he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon, or hearing, one who hears. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Pants. Levi, joined or accompanying attachment. And she conceived again and bare a son. And she said, Now will I praise the Lord. And therefore she called his name Judah. Let God be praised, and left bearing.
Okay, so she had 4 children and stopped bearing. The Christ line is going to come through Judah. Thus, Leah became the ancestry of David and our Lord Jesus Christ. So if you do ancestry.com, you go all the way back to Leah, through Jesus Christ, through David, all the way back to Leah. After 4 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, she stopped bearing children. And verse 30, again, one of the classic lines, Genesis chapter 30, verse 1. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, give me children, else I die. Or, one of the texts reads, give me children, or I'm as good as dead. Give me children, I'll just pine away from vexation. Rachel was not satisfied with just Jacob's love and attention, being the favorite wife. She wanted sons too. The intense anxiety of Hebrew women for children arose from the hope of giving birth to the promised seed. The sight of Leah's sons filled her with jealousy. And again, the problem with multiple wives is it's a violation of God's original ordinance. One wife for one man, Adam and Eve. Okay, this is before Mormonism. Verse 2. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. And he said, am I in God's stead? Who hath, I'm not the one who withheld from thee the fruit of the womb. It isn't my fault. Obviously, I'm doing pretty good with Leah. And she said, all right, here's what we're going to do to correct the situation. Behold, my maid, Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. And bear upon my knees was a way of saying that she would adopt the children, and they would be considered hers. Thus, through Bilhah, she could build a family. Verse 4. So she gave her Bilhah. She gave Bilhah her handmaid to wife. Jacob went into her, and Bilhah conceived, and bare Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. Dan means judge or vindicator, or he has been vindicated. So that's what we got here. I've been vindicated in my handmaid. When Bilhah bore Jacob a son, Rachel claimed him as her own. She believed that God, as her judge, had vindicated her through Bilhah, that is, that it had taken away the reproach of her childlessness. Verse 7.
And Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again, and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, with great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali, wrestling, my struggle.
Rachel considered her relationship with her sister to be like a wrestling match. She was not wrestling simply with her sister, but also with God for his mercy. With the second son, she felt she had won a victory with Leah and God. Leah wasn't about to give up, though. She continued to struggle by giving Jacob her servant, Zilpah. Verse 9. When Leah saw that she had left bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob to wife. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, a troop cometh. And she called his name Gad. And Gad means a troop or good fortune or fortunate. Okay. I don't know. This guy Span keeps calling me. Anyway, so basically, what's happening here is now Gad. There's a great verse in the Old Testament where it says they would bring their offerings to a troop, and it basically means they would bring the offerings to fortune, to the fortunate, to the luck god, and it's translated as troop because that's what Gad means, and that's what that Hebrew word is. But it's more accurate. We would understand it more as, just the god of fortune and destiny and luck. That's who we're serving. But so she called it, hey, I've got Gad. I've got good fortune. It's been fortunate. I've got a second son now. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a second son. And Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher, which means happy. It's a great name. hey, I'm going to call my kid Asher or Happy. And Reuben went in the days of the wheat harvest. The wheat harvest was in May in that part of the country. And in May, and she found mandrakes in the field and brought them unto her mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. Now the mandrake plant had a large forked root, which was considered to have properties that would promote conception. I think it was probably blue and in a little pill form to start with. Rachel thought that they may help her conceive. So she bargained for some. So the mandrakes were known to promote conception. So that's why she wanted it. It would help her conceive. And so she said, I can give me some. Leah played it really well. Here, verse 15. She said unto her, oh, it's a small matter that thou hast taken my husband. Why wouldst thou take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. So Isaac got traded for the mandrakes. And Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's. He doesn't know anything about this. I've hired you. You're mine tonight. It cost me some mandrakes. So he lay with her that night. And guess what happened? God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, God has given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And she called his name Ishkachar. Since God hearkened unto Leah, she must have spent some time in prayer to God. She gives God the credit and believes that he rewarded her for giving Zilpah to Jacob. Thus she named the boy Ishkachar, meaning he is a reward, or he will bring a reward. Verse 19, and Leah conceived again and bare Jacob the sixth son. And Leah said, God hath endued me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him six sons. She called the name Sixpack. No, she called him Zebulun. And afterward she bare a daughter and called her name Dinah. Leah said her sixth son was a good gift from God to add your dowry to her bride price. Her dowry, her bride price. I'm giving you six sons. We're going up in value here. She hoped that six sons would be enough to cause Jacob to exalt her, and that is, give her the place of honor that the primary wife ought to have. So she named him Zebulun, meaning honor or exalted dwelling. Finally, Jacob's only daughter, Dinah, was born to Leah after six sons. When girls are born, there's really no celebration. Oh, got a daughter. All right, move on. Dinah means justice or vindication. Verse 22, and God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. She called his name Joseph. Joseph means may he add, and said, the Lord shall add, or the Lord is adding to me another son. Now, when God remembers, it does not mean he had forgotten, but it was God's time to actively enter the situation to do something about it. This intervention was to answer Rachel's prayers that he'd been listening to for the entire time of Leah's childbearing years. She's been praying a long time. God, not the mandrakes, made it possible for Rachel to conceive a son. In that culture, barrenness was considered a disgrace. That disgrace now was removed with the birth of a son. But she was not satisfied with only one son, since Leah had six. So she named her son Joseph. May he add, or may God add, and asked for another son from God. Fortunately, the fulfillment of that prayer would cause her death. Verse 25, and it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go into my own place, into my country. So shortly after the birth of Joseph, Jacob's term of servitude expired. Jacob felt it was time to establish independence for his family and time to return to Canaan. Verse 26.
Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go. For thou knowest my service, which I have done thee. Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience divination, omens, enchantments. that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake.
Laban received this information through enchantment, through divination. He'd read his horoscope every morning. Although Laban talked about the Lord, he trusted in devilish means to gather information rather than from the true God. Laban knew he was prospering because of God blessing Jacob. So he didn't want Jacob to leave. Verse 28.
And he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude. And the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming. And now, when shall I provide for mine own house also?
Jacob reminds Laban how hard he worked for him, and that Laban was prospering because of God's goodness to Jacob. And now it was time for him to provide for his own family. Instead of making, him rich, it was time to start his own business. Verse 31.
And he said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock.
The eastern shepherds receive for their hire not money, but a certain amount of the increase or produce of the flock. Jacob knew Laban was desperate and would agree to most anything in order to keep him around. So a new agreement was reached. Jacob would receive remuneration in the usual way, but he specified the terms. Verse 32.
I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. For every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. And Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word.
Now, eastern sheep were usually white and goats were black. Spotted and speckled ones were comparatively few and rare. Thus, Laban agreed to this, immediately. Although Jacob had great skill and experience in the breeding of animals, it seems that divine intervention was at work. Verse 35.
And Laban removed that day the he-goats that were ring-straked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hand of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob. And Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks.
All right, Laban removed all the goats and the sheep that would go to Jacob if born later, giving them to his sons to care for. He separated them from the rest of the herd that Jacob would continue to shepherd. Jacob continued to work. He would shepherd, oversee the action. And Laban took him and put him in a pen, gave him to his sons to watch over. So he has sons now. 3 days' journey away. It wasn't like 3 hours. 3 days. He wanted to make sure that there was no, he wasn't going to get anything stolen. These are mine. All right, let's see what happens when God gets in the picture. Verse 37.
And Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and pilled white strakes in them, and made the white appear which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had pilled before the flocks in the gutters, and in the watering troughs when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-straked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not into Laban's cattle. And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and manservants, and camels, and asses.
I didn't want to get into all the specifics on this, but basically, he did certain things to attract the stronger cattle to only mate with those that were basically spotted, ring-straked, or speckled. So he would do that, and he would also be able to control, instead of the long troughs, he would have smaller watering places, so he could control which cattle came there, and he put things up to coerce them to go after those specific females. All right, and so they just kept having children, and he would immediately move them away, and anything that was feeble, and those other ones now that came out black, or would stay with Laban. So all of a sudden, like it says, Jacob shrewdly handled the flock in such a way that his animals were stronger and more numerous than Laban's. All of this took 6 years. With the great increase of Jacob's flocks now, he was able to obtain male and female servants, camels, and donkeys. He was now a rich man. Truly, God was fulfilling his promise. God took care of him. They worked together. He knew how to do certain things, and he kept getting more and more cattle that looked like him. Jacob's increasing prosperity stirred up the jealousy, though, on the part of Laban's sons. The insinuations against Jacob's trustworthiness by Laban's sons and the sullen reserve, the churlish conduct of Laban himself had made Jacob's situation in his uncle's abode very frustrating and agonizing. It is always one of the irritations present regarding worldly prosperity. It provokes the envy of others. No matter how careful a person is trying to maintain a good conscience, he can't always count on maintaining a good name in the hypocritical world. Thus, this Jacob was experiencing. So like any God-fearing man would do, he probably asked God for direction and relief in prayer. Verse 3, and the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. Jacob may not have felt free to leave until God told him it was time. Remember, God informed him while conducting him to Haran that he would be with him and would keep him until he had done that which he had spoken to him about. Genesis 28:15. Bob, why don't you read that for us?
And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. For I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken of to thee.
Right. So did he do everything that needed to be completed? Leaving and heading back to his relatives after 20 years might not be easy, though, especially because when he left, his brother Esau threatened to kill him. However, God promised to be with him. God promised to protect him. So Jacob need not have any fear. Jacob next acts the part of a dutiful husband and tells his wife his plans. He needed to be sure that Rachel and Leah would be willing to leave their home city and go with him. So we pick up in verse 4, 31:4, and Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah, just the two women, not the servants, not Zilpah and Bilhah, not the kids, just the two of them. And he says, look, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And you know that with all my power I've served your father. And your father has deceived me. He changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. Probably exaggerated here because, he said, the speckled shall be your wages. Then all the cattle were speckled. So he said, all right, the ring-straked shall be thy hire. Then they bear all the cattle ring-straked. Thus God had taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived, that I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream. And behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-straked, speckled and grizzly. Basically, what this means is they were speckled, spotted, and striped. Okay? That's what all those mean. Speckled, spotted, or striped. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, here am I. And he said, lift up your eyes and see, all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban does unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. So, having stated his strong grounds of dissatisfaction with their father's conduct and the unkind retribution he had gotten For all of his faithful services, he informed them of the blessing of God, and they had made him, and that God had made him rich, notwithstanding Laban's design to ruin him. Finally, he speaks of the command from God he had received. It was time for him to return to his own country. Verse 14.
And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours, and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do.
Rachel and Leah also felt the change in the attitude of their father and brothers. Now that Laban had sons, they no longer had any inheritance from their father. They were being treated like foreigners anyway. Thus, Rachel and Leah were willing to encourage Jacob to obey God, whose input was pretty clear. It was time for Jacob and his wives and his family and all that he had to leave at once and return to the land that God had promised Abraham and Abraham's descendants.
Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting which he had gotten in Padan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan.
Now, little time is spent by pastoral people in removing. It's time to go? No problem. The taking down of the tents and the poles and stowing them away with their other baggage, the putting their wives and children in seats or hudas on the back of camels. That's what you ride on if you ride on a camel, a huda. Or in large baskets. Sometimes on donkeys, they have panniers, which are just large baskets. And the arranging of the various parts of the flock under the respective shepherds can all be accomplished in short order. They can disappear very quickly, tear it all down, and head out. They're very good at that because they've been doing it all their lives. And with that, we're going to head to the promised land again next week.